Hello, welcome to Senior Moments. I'm Dolly Simonovich. This is the first in a series of programs on hearing loss. In this program, we will talk with Debbie Clark, an audiologist at Pacific Hearing Service in Menlo Park. Thank you for joining us on our program, Debbie.
I'm glad to be here.
Oh, thanks. Can you tell us what an audiologist is?
An audiologist is a hearing specialist, a non-medical. We're not physicians, we're a hearing specialist.
Mm-hmm. And what does an audiologist do then?
Well, we do a wide range of things. We do diagnostic hearing evaluations. We may get referrals from physicians for a patient who is complaining of hearing loss or ringing in their ears or something like that. And we do the diagnostic evaluation and send the report to the physician. And we also are involved in the management of hearing loss. So if the patient doesn't have a medical condition that needs to be treated by the physician, then often they're a candidate for hearing aids, amplification. And so we can fit them with hearing aids, train them about how to manage their hearing loss and that sort of thing.
I remember when I was a child, there was ear, nose, and throat specialists.
Yes.
Now, do they still exist, or did you take
Oh no,
over part of that?
they still exist.
They
still exist. That's right. And we work in concert with each other, actually. So the ear, nose, and throat physician. One example might be if there's a child who's not hearing well. We might do the diagnostic evaluation, and our test results would indicate to the physician that, oh, this child has ear infections. Mm-hmm. So the physician would treat the ear infections. If, on the other hand, our diagnostic tests lead the physician and ourselves to realize that, oh, this child doesn't have a medical condition that's treatable, this child needs hearing aids, then the physician would refer back to us for the management of the hearing loss.
So you work in concert with an MD, and
Mm-hmm.
both of you diagnosed to a certain extent, and both of you, I mean, he treats the infections or the things
That's
that are
right,
treatable.
or is something that's surgically treatable, something like that. And some hearing losses are surgically treatable, and others are not. So it depends on what's going on with the patient.
Would you tell us how hearing works?
The outer ear picks up the sound, sends it down your ear canal to your eardrum. Mm-hmm. That sets in motion some little bones that are attached to the eardrum that stimulate some little hair cells that are way down deep in the inner part of the ear. And then in turn that stimulates the nerve of hearing, and that's how the signal gets to your brain.
What do we do to maintain good hearing?
That's a really good question. Some of it is genetic, so there's some things that we can't change, mm-hmm. but there was a study that came out actually a few years ago that showed that people who have a healthy lifestyle are less likely to have hearing loss. So there are certain health conditions that affect your hearing. And then of course we all know that we need to avoid loud noise.
What kinds of hearing losses do you see?
We see all kinds of hearing losses, very mild hearing losses, and by the way, a mild hearing loss can have a pretty big impact on a person's life, mm-hmm. depending on what your lifestyle is, mm-hmm. to quite profound hearing losses. And they can be caused from anything from ear infections to illnesses, to genetics, all kinds of things.
What are the ages of your patients?
We have a wide range of ages. We see very young children. Often those children are coming in because they're language delayed. They're not speaking on time, and mm-hmm. so the doctor wants to find out, is it due to hearing loss? And we have patients all through the age range up, well into their 90s and above. So it's all over the board.
Who should get tested and why?
Well, of course, in my opinion, everybody should be tested, and there are a lot of good reasons for that. Even teens, it's a good idea. There is a recent study that shows a 30% increase in hearing loss among teens, we think possibly related to listening to their iPods too loud. Baby boomers, went to a lot of rock concerts. And so we see a lot of baby boomers who have, maybe it's a mild hearing loss, but again, a mild hearing loss can have a pretty significant impact on your life if you're sitting in a business meeting and you can't hear, the person next to you. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we all know that as we get older, maybe in late 50s, early 60s, it varies from person to person. We can see age-related changes. So a hearing, especially if you have any question, you're noticing having difficulty in noisy environments, that sort of thing, it's a good idea.
Well, is it a good idea to get tested earlier?
Absolutely. And the reason is we know that people who address their hearing loss earlier are more successful with their hearing aids. And part of that has to do with brain plasticity.
Now, what's that?
So there are actually physical changes that happen in the auditory areas of your brain when you have hearing loss. It's sort of if you don't use it, you lose it. So even if you have mild loss, there's certain sounds that you aren't hearing. And so those neurons get kind of lazy.
So you actually forget how to hear.
In a way, that might be one way that you could put it. And so by intervening early, getting hearing aids even when your hearing loss is mild makes that transition easier. People who wait a long time and live with hearing loss for many years before they get hearing aids have a very difficult time adapting. It's a little bit like if you've been in a dark room and someone flips the lights on and everything seems brighter than it really is.
Yes.
If you've been living with hearing loss for a long time and suddenly you hear everything sounds abnormal, and it's because your brain has been busy changing all of those years.
Adapting to your
quiet world.
Yes.
Exactly.
Do you have any statistics about hearing, like who it's affecting?
Yeah, well, about 10% of the population has hearing loss. And it's a bit of a myth that hearing loss is for the aging, because about 65% of people with hearing loss are under the age of 65. So, as I mentioned, baby boomers, teens is on the rise. So there are a lot of people out there with hearing loss.
I would think that a lot of people who come to you are relieved to find out, that their hearing loss is just related to an allergy, and they deal with the allergy and they can hear again.
That's
Hallelujah.
right. That's right. Yeah, the best case scenario is when someone comes in and they can't hear and their ears are just plugged with wax, and we can clean the wax out and they can hear, and they're the happiest patients we have.
I was on a plane one time. It was about a 4-hour ride, and when we landed, my ear didn't clear up. I went to a pharmacist. He says, take Sudafed. So I did. I don't like to take drugs, so I just took one, And then the hearing loss moved into the second ear. So for about 1 week, I couldn't hear, and then I started taking the Sudafed, and it cleared up. So do you see things like that, instances like that, and what do you do in cases like that?
Yes, we do. And quite often when people fly, especially if they've been flying with a cold, it happened to me one time too. You feel very plugged up and you can get some congestion behind the eardrum. But actually, anytime someone has a sudden change in their hearing, we encourage them to see an ear specialist immediately, because there is something called a sudden hearing loss, which can be permanent if it's not treated right away. And that window of time is very important. So if you have a sudden change in hearing, it may be just something like congestion, but it could be something a little more serious, and so we encourage people to check that out immediately.
Now, even though I knew it was because it didn't clear from the plane, that's still recommended to get it checked out right away.
It's still not a bad idea, yes, because the physician can at least look in your ear and see if there's maybe they see some congestion in there. But if they look in the ear and there's no congestion, then you have to ask, well, what is it?
How about medications? Can that cause any problems?
They can actually, and sometimes having the wrong mixture of medications can cause it can affect your hearing. So we always encourage people to check with their internist and to make sure that their internist knows all of the medications that they're taking and not just some of the medications that they're taking.
Okay. We'll be right back.
Who's lived most everywhere, from Zanzibar to Berkeley Square. But Patty's only seen the sights a girl can see from Brooklyn Heights. What a crazy pair.
Oh my, Patty. Did you find all your files? Finally. Who knew it'd be this much work when Richard and I decided to retire? Well, what are you gonna do first? Oh, we're heading down to Brooklyn Heights and starting on that Social Security paperwork. Why would you do that? What do you mean? Well, it's so much easier just to log on to socialsecurity.gov and file online. Well, what if I need to know how much money I'll be getting? Online. What if our address changes? Online. What if I want Medicare too? Online. So how did you get so darn smart anyway? Online.
San Bruno City Park is the perfect place to celebrate special occasions with your family and friends. Whether you have a group of 40 or 200, City Park has a place for you and your party. Picnic sites have outdoor grills, picnic tables, easy access to restrooms, play areas, and places to relax and savor the moment. San Bruno City Park is conveniently located at Crystal Springs and Oak Avenue. To reserve a picnic site, please apply in person at the Recreation Center in City Park. For more information, visit our website or call us at 616-7180.
I was 46.
I was just 42.
I was 46.
I was 45 when a mammogram found my cancer.
Found my cancer.
Found my cancer.
And helped save my life.
Mammograms can catch cancer early when it's most treatable.
Experts recommend that even women with no family history of breast cancer begin annual mammograms at age 40.
Please talk to your doctor about a mammogram today.
Mammography saves lives. One of them may be yours. Visit mammographysaveslives.org.
Why do you like San Bruno Cable?
I like that it's the same people at the counter. Oh, and they also know me by name.
I like that it's a local business and it keeps the money in our community.
I had a problem with my channels and I called and they came out that same day.
I didn't even have to sign a contract. The other guys wanted me for 2 whole years.
When I called to set up my cable service, they asked if they could come out the next day. I thought I'd have to wait a week for an appointment.
Thank you for choosing San Bruno Cable.
Welcome back to Senior Moments. Before the break, we discussed some causes of hearing loss. Well, keep watching when we talk about what to expect when you go in for testing.
When should a person get tested?
Well, there are certain signs and symptoms of hearing loss. For example, if you have ringing in your ears, quite often that's a sign of hearing loss. If people tell you that you talk loud, that might be a sign of hearing loss because you're not able to monitor your voice. If you notice having difficulty hearing in restaurants, that may be an indication. Turning the TV up too loud, those are all signs of hearing loss. And so those are red flags that suggest maybe it's time to come in and get a hearing test.
If you can't hear in a large area and there's a lot of background noise and you can't hear one person, wouldn't you think that that's just kind of normal? You can't hear because it's noisy. And yet some people seem to be able to hear in those instances.
For some people it's easier to hear in those environments than others, but for people who have hearing loss, it's very difficult to hear in a noisy environment. And so that is sometimes what brings people in.
Well, why would you miss, like I'll hear somebody and I'll miss one word. And I'll ask them to repeat what they said, and I'll miss one word. Why would that be?
Well, certain words are more difficult than others, or certain sounds in speech are more difficult than others. For example, one of the most common types of hearing loss that we see is a hearing loss that's worse in the high pitches. Maybe a person hears well in the lower bass deep sounds, but they have hearing loss in the high-pitched treble sounds. Well, certain components of speech are in that high-pitched treble, like C, K, that, or SH, or CH, or F. Those are high-pitched sounds. So if I say the word cat, you might hear at, because your hearing loss is filtering out components of the word.
But if you said bat,
you would get
I'd be able to hear it because
it's a deeper, louder sound.
I see. So in the testing, what can people expect in the testing? Does it hurt?
It doesn't hurt.
You don't pull their ear and shake it?
No, we don't pull their ear and shake it, nothing like that.
Okay.
We sit down, we take a history, talk to, if I were testing your hearing, I would ask you about, what you're noticing, what kinds of environments you're having difficulty with, and get a little bit of a health history, medications, that sort of thing. And we do some objective tests that tell us about how your eardrums are moving and things about the mechanical function of your ear. And then a lot of it is just what you remember from grade school. Putting on headphones, pressing a button when you hear the sounds. And in addition to that, we want to know how you understand speech. So we do test for word clarity. We want to know how you hear when there's background noise. So we have tests for listening and background noise.
Okay, you're going to hear some words, and I want you to repeat back the words the best you can.
Yes, ma'am.
Say the word airplane.
Airplane.
Say the word downtown.
Downtown.
Say the word outside.
Outside.
Very good.
There's nothing that's particularly difficult, but it just gives us an idea of how you're doing in a variety of settings.
Is it important to be tested when you're younger so you have like a baseline?
It's not a bad idea to get a baseline, because sometimes people come in and they say, I'm just really having difficulty, and maybe their hearing is normal or borderline normal, but it would be nice to be able to compare it to a hearing test that was 5 years ago. Maybe their hearing was a lot better 5 years ago, and then that will help us to understand why they're noticing difficulty.
I'm an ex-PE teacher. Do you have any exercises that that increase your hearing or help you with your hearing?
Not so much physical exercises, although we do know that people who lead a healthy lifestyle are more likely to, or less likely to have hearing loss. But there are some listening exercises that you can do to help keep those neurons working in the auditory areas of your brain. So we use a program here called LACE. It stands for Listening and Communication Enhancement. It was developed in San Francisco by some researchers there, and it's a series of exercises like listening in noise, listening to rapid speech, and auditory memory. So you might hear a sentence, and then you have to remember what was the word after such and such a word. So auditory memory is an important part of hearing.
What kind of changes in technology have you seen?
Oh, technology has changed dramatically since I started. I started in the early 80s, and at that time hearing aids were just little analog devices, and if we wanted to make an adjustment, we either had a little tiny screwdriver that we would go in and adjust, or we had to send it back to the manufacturer and say, put a different circuit in this because this patient doesn't like this circuit. So it could be very time consuming. Now with digital technology, it's amazing. The options that we have, the noise reduction algorithms that are available, the way we can fine-tune the hearing aid to be very precise to the person's hearing loss.
Really?
Yes, and now it's very exciting because now we also have Bluetooth technology. So we have patients who can connect their hearing aids to their cell phone or connect their hearing aids directly to their TV. So the most recent area of research that's very exciting is all about connectivity, connecting to your world.
So the chances of someone saying, I hate my hearing aid because it just amplifies everything instead of the speech. I need help with speech, or I need help with just this little thing, and instead everything's amplified. That's less likely to happen with the new technology. Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps it's less likely to happen, but I always like to caution people, because if you wait too long to get hearing aids, if you live with hearing loss for a long time, it's a bit of a shock. You do hear everything, and you're not used to hearing everything. You're used to a very, very quiet world. So quite often, people who get hearing aids for the first time will complain about hearing noise because they're not accustomed to hearing noise. And it can really take weeks or months, depending on the person, to adapt to hearing things around them. Things like paper rattling, which is a sound that maybe you hear, but if you haven't heard that in 5 years, it's a little strange to suddenly hear it. So even though we talk about how fantastic the noise reduction technology is, and it is fantastic, if you're not used to hearing noise, you have to adapt to that first.
So what you're saying is that if they got the hearing aid when they just had slight hearing loss, they're more likely to be able to adapt to the hearing aid.
Absolutely.
But the longer they've been without the hearing aid and losing their hearing, the longer it's going to take them to adapt to the hearing aid.
That is absolutely right. Absolutely right, because their brain in those years that they've been living with hearing loss has been changing.
And the change of the brain is adapting to their silent world.
That's exactly right. And so you have to retrain your brain to hear again. You have to retrain yourself to filter out sounds. Sometimes I have a patient who comes in and says, well, I'm hearing the traffic outside my window. I don't want to hear the traffic outside my window. And I'll say, well, I hear the traffic outside the window. But they haven't heard that in so long. They think it's abnormal, but it's not abnormal.
How much of the sound that you hear is just filtered out and thrown away by your brain? This is a weird, I know this is a far out question.
Okay.
But I mean, you know,
ready.
you hear things, you hear a certain amount of things and you don't even notice them. And then you get this hearing aid, and I'm talking about even people who have good hearing, just ignore so much.
That's right. We ignore a lot in our environments. When you think about it, there's a lot of noise even in a quiet room.
Yes.
Your computer might be making noise. If you're reading the paper, it's making noise.
Refrigerator.
Yeah, your clothes rustling, things like
Yes.
that. And we hear those all the time and just ignore them. But if you haven't heard those sounds in a long time, it's very difficult to ignore.
And that's where the hearing aid and the problems with the hearing aid.
And so that's why it's so important to adapt. And I think one reason often people reject hearing aids is because they have waited so long and they're not used to hearing these sounds. And so it's important when a person gets hearing aids that they receive counseling about this, because it takes a little time to adapt and to get used to the sound, and you have to stick with it. If you don't stick with it, then you really lose out, as hearing aids can have a huge impact on your quality of life. And you just have to kind of barrel through and let your brain adapt to that sound, and then the payoff is fantastic.
I read something the other day where if you throw a frog into a vat of boiling water, it jumps out. But if you put it in cold water and heat it up, it'll boil to death because it doesn't know it's dying.
That's a very good analogy.
So people don't know that they're losing their hearing until their husband or wife says, "Get in there, I can't stand it anymore because you can't hear me."
That's right. That's actually a good point, because hearing loss tends to, for most people, tends to occur very gradually over time. There are some people who do lose their hearing suddenly for various reasons, but it's often a very, very gradual process. So you kind of get used to it as you go along, and all of a sudden people around you realize that you're not hearing, but you've kind of gotten used to it and you don't realize it.
Yes, and so you're missing out on everything that's going on around you.
That's right. And sometimes you just don't know what you're missing.
Sometimes it gets comfortable too, I suppose.
People who have hearing loss often report feeling isolated and feeling depressed because they do allow themselves to get cut off. So wearing hearing aids can really keep you in touch with the world.
What does it mean, listening so hard that you can't hear?
People who have hearing loss, even with their hearing aids, work harder to follow a conversation than someone with normal hearing does. They're constantly filling in the blanks. There are little pieces missing, and so they're filling it in all the time. And if you think about it, if you have to concentrate on every single word that you're trying to hear, then you can really miss the big picture. So people complain about being fatigued after a conversation because they're working so hard.
Is there anything that can be done for that? I mean, like relaxation? I mean, does relaxing help you just get into the moment and just let the hearing aid do its job?
Well, we do know that stress can impact how you follow a conversation, because if you're focusing really hard on something and at the same time you're stressed about something or distracted by something, maybe you're sitting in a restaurant and it's too cold and you're distracted about that, then it's just one more thing to keep you from getting the information that you're trying to get. So sure, if you can be more relaxed in a communication setting, then you'll probably do a little bit better.
And let it happen instead of make it happen.
Well, you have to do a little bit of both.
Well, once you adapt to your hearing aid, no problem.
Fewer problems, how about that?
Fewer problems. Now, how does one find an audiologist, and what should one look for?
Well, one way to do it is to go there to the website that the American Academy of Audiology has. They have a Find an Audiologist link on their website. But a really good way to do it is ask someone who's been to an audiologist. If you have a friend who's had a hearing test or has purchased hearing aids, ask them what their experience was like. It's important to go to someone that you feel comfortable with, that you trust, that you feel like, that you know is going to spend time with you.
So I would assume that you can find them in doctor's office. So your doctor may have an audiologist on staff.
Some ear, nose, and throat doctors do have audiologists on staff. Others do not. If you're in a hospital setting, quite often the hospital have audiologists on staff.
So I would assume like Kaiser probably would.
They do, yes.
And otherwise, you work by referral usually from your doctor.
That's right. We're a private practice, freestanding audiology practice, and we get referrals from physicians. But that's right. We get a lot of referrals from patients who have referred their friends, or they were just walking by and they saw us.
If you were to tell people what the most important thing, or one of the most important things, what would you like to tell them?
Don't put it off. When you start noticing things that make you suspicious that you might have some hearing loss, go ahead and get a hearing test. Talk to the audiologist about what the options are. You know, it used to be that we didn't have great options for people with mild hearing loss, but now we have fantastic hearing aids for very mild hearing losses. Address it. Be assertive. Don't be afraid of hearing loss. It is a myth that hearing loss belongs to the aging population. Hearing loss can impact your quality of life, and so just go ahead and take care of it.
So for our seniors, you'd want them to know too that well, not to look for it, but be aware that the possibility exists in their children and their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. I mean, things have been happening as far as the
noise exposure and things like that. Yes.
And there's hearing problems because the younger people are...
They do have to be careful. There's been a 30% increase in hearing loss for teens. And so those iPods probably have a lot to do with it. So it is important to keep the volume down and to use earphones that fit properly so that you don't have to turn the volume up quite so much.
I see seniors using those too.
That's right.
So
there's nothing wrong with using them as long as you don't turn the volume up too much.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed our conversation so much.
Well, so have I. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So what are you waiting for? Go out and get your hearing tested. It won't hurt, and you might actually find out that your hearing is fine. But if it isn't, there are many devices that can help you. So don't put it off. Like any other part of your brain or your body, you've got to use it or lose it. I'm Dolly Simonovich. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Senior Moments.